build that foundation, start with 8B graphite powder and a bigger size dry brush. Since the right side of the baby's face is receiving much less light than the left, that's the perfect place to begin, because it allows you to establish the overall lighting before worrying about the brighter areas. Rather than trying to achieve a deep black immediately, build the graphite slowly using small circular motions. This gives much better control over the values and helps avoid those stubborn dark patches that almost every artist has struggled with. For the smaller areas, switch to a medium-sized dry brush, because it gives much better control without disturbing the surrounding values. One mistake that's incredibly common is trying to finish the shading in one pass. It feels faster, but it usually creates more work later because removing excess graphite is much harder than adding another light layer. Think of it like making tea. You can always make it stronger, but once you've added too much, there's no easy way back. Another thing worth paying attention to is the movement of the brush. Keep it moving continuously in small circular motions instead of rubbing back and forth. The moment the brush sits in one place for too long, the graphite begins collecting unevenly, and later those little patches become surprisingly difficult to hide. Once the base is evenly built, lightly blend everything with a tissue paper. The purpose isn't removing graphite, it's simply softening the transition between light and shadow, because baby skin rarely contains harsh value changes. By the time the base layer is complete, the portrait still won't contain many details, but it should already feel soft and three-dimensional. That's the sign that the foundation is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. All the reference images you need, including the grid and outline versions, are available on our Academy site to make your drawing process smoother and more structured. Now let's move on to the forehead, and believe it or not, this is one of the easiest places to accidentally make a baby look much older. The reason isn't the shading, it's the texture. Baby skin isn't covered with obvious pores. Most of the texture is so subtle that you only notice it when the light catches it from the right angle. The first step is to build the main highlight on the forehead, and for that grab your Mono 0 eraser. Start just above the eyebrow and gently lift the graphite using small circular motions while keeping the pressure extremely light. Rather than pulling out a bright white highlight immediately, slowly lift the graphite using small circular motions while keeping the pressure very light. Think of it like increasing the brightness of a photograph, one click at a time. Small adjustments almost always look more realistic than dramatic ones. As the highlight becomes larger, you'll notice the center naturally appears brighter while the edges remain beautifully soft. That smooth transition is exactly what creates the gentle roundness of a baby's forehead. And it's one of those small details that makes the skin look soft instead of flat. Once the highlight is established, grab a kneaded eraser and gently dab around the edges to soften the transition even further. One thing that's always worth asking yourself at this stage is not whether the texture looks realistic, but whether the forehead already feels round. If the form isn't convincing now, adding more pores later won't magically fix it. Now it's time to build the texture using the Mono 0 eraser. Instead of creating evenly spaced dots, constantly change their size, spacing and brightness, because nature never repeats itself perfectly. Some pores catch more light, some almost disappear, and others naturally gather into tiny clusters. That's exactly the kind of randomness our eyes recognize as real skin. As the texture approaches the bridge of the nose, begin mixing tiny strokes with the dots, because the texture should always follow the surface underneath. Even the smallest marks should help describe the roundness of the face instead of simply sitting on top of the paper. Now let's quickly build the upper eyelid highlight just like we did on the forehead. This highlight isn't just adding brightness, it's creating the illusion that the eyelid is wrapping around the eyeball, which immediately gives the eye much more depth and realism. By the way, if you're a complete beginner and you keep throwing away your drawings because you feel like you just can't draw, it's not your fault. You just don't know the basics.